Hello and welcome to this Print Live. Early morning in the wee hours today, the fighter jets of the Indian Air Force, the Mirage 2000s, carried out strikes inside Pakistan, and they targeted a terrorist camp, a Jaish-e-Mohammed camp run by the Jaish-e-Mohammed, and they bombed this particular camp, which comes in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area of Pakistan. The question that we're asking today is: India has bombed terror camps in Pakistan. What happens now? So send in your questions. I have with me my colleague who will be taking your questions on the diplomatic front, and I'll be here answering your whatever questions that you might have on the military front. Well, we have a first question from Rahul, and he's asking whether these are surgical strikes or not. Well, Rahul, if you're asking whether this is a repeat of the surgical strike of 2016, well, it is not. But yes, this is indeed a surgical strike. You'll have to understand what exactly is a surgical strike. Surgical strike means where we carry out intelligence-based pinpointed attack. In 2016, it was the Special Forces of the Indian Army, that is the 4 and the 9 para, which went across into POK and carried out attacks, intelligence-based specific attacks targeting multiple locations, that is the training camps and launch pads in POK. Here in this case, it was the Air Force which carried out this surgical strike. So yes, it is also a surgical strike because these are pinpointed operations that were carried out by the Indian military based on the intelligence inputs that we've received, and based on which we've targeted the Balakot camp, that is the Jaish-e-Mohammed. Remember, this Balakot camp is one of the main training centers of the Jaish-e-Mohammed. This was the same place where the son of Jaish-e-Mohammed Chief Hafiz Mohammed Maulana Masood Azhar was trained, and this is also the camp where, remember that in December there was a Afghan war veteran who had sneaked into Jammu and Kashmir much before the Pulwama attacks, and this is the same camp where this particular Rashid Ghazi used to train the JEM cadres. Also remember that this is what we've learned from our sources in the defense establishment, is that this particular camp had about 6 barracks, and all the barracks were about 2 to 3 story height. Now I have a question from Nirmal Joshi. Is there a possibility of India-Pak war? Well, to be fair, the first information of this particular, operation by the Indian Air Force the confirmation of it came in from none other than the Pakistani military itself. Now, it was the Pakistani military spokesperson, the ISPR spokesperson, who took on to Twitter and tweeted saying that Indian fighter jets had crossed into the LOC, and that is the first signal. And they have also claimed that they were, the Indian jets were forced to retreat, and in the hurry they left a payload behind, and the payload struck at a particular forested area. They shown pictures of it, claiming that there were no casualties or anything of that sort. So yes, so when the Pakistan itself has claimed that the Indian fighter jets went back without attacking, and even the payload did not strike the intended targets, so I don't see any chance of Pakistan trying to escalate it on a much larger scale. But I have with me Nayanima Basu, who covers the foreign affairs very closely, and I'll toss this question to her to actually wanting to know from her perspective whether there's a possibility of an Indo-Pak war or not.
Thank you, Snehesh. Well, to answer your question, Nirmal, this is not an India-Pakistan war. What the action that the Indian Air Force took today was to target the terrorist camps that are operating out of Pakistan. So this is not against the Pakistan military or the Pakistan government. This is against the terror camps that are based there. And as the Foreign Secretary in the morning had told the media and also the public at large, is that this was mostly targeted at the terror camps, and this was done because there have been intelligence inputs that Jaish-e-Mohammed was targeting some more attacks on the country on various multiple locations. So this action was supposed to be taken and was taken by India, because despite requesting Pakistan again and again to take action against them, nothing was happening, which is why India had to take this preemptive action, which is why he used these words, this was a non-military preemptive action.
Well, I have this question coming in from Sai Krishna. Was there any engagement with the Pakistan Air Force? Well, Sai, I think that is for the for the Pakistani establishment to say whether there was any engagement of that sort. But yes, the Pakistan did say that they had scrambled fighter jets, and because of which India had to retreat. So. Well, the fact is that all our pilots, all our aircraft, along with the pilots, are back in our own territory. They've landed back safely. There were no casualties on our side, and it is also a fact that we went in and hit the target that we intended to hit, which was in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is deep inside the Pakistani territory. Remember that this particular camp, as a crow flies, it is about 65 kilometers. The location of this camp is about 65 kilometers from the LOC. So yes, we went in deep and we came back without any casualty. So even if the Pakistan fighters had tried to engage the Indian forces, the matter of the fact remains that we were able to come back safely. This was a major success as far as the operation is concerned. Well, I have a question coming in from Shweta Thomas, and she's asking, do you feel the surgical strikes are justified at this point? The fact is that India did carry out the surgical strike. Well, I will not call it as a revenge or anything of that sort to the Pulwama attack. But remember that Pakistan, as any country cannot be allowed to get away with, harboring and sponsoring terrorists on its soil, which carry out attacks against a third country. Remember that Pakistan uses these terrorist groups not just, and I refuse to call them non-state actors, because I believe that they are actually state actors, because they're an extension of the Pakistani establishment, and they are waging this proxy war. So yes, any country for that matter, be it Pakistan or be it any other country, cannot be allowed to get away with sponsoring terror on its soil against a third country. And this is something that India has been consistently saying. And I'll go over to Ms. Basu here, but before that, the Foreign Secretary himself had said that these were preemptive strikes because they had received specific intel about this group of terrorists who were planning to carry out more suicide attacks. Nanima.
Well, and also to add to your question, and I can see there's another question from Shweta Thomas, do you feel the surgical strikes are justified at this point? Now, to take both the questions, we need to understand that this is an action India has taken, keeping in mind the fact that the international community right now supports India, and it has a lot of sympathy towards India right now and understands what Pakistan is doing in terms of promoting terror from its soil. And the international community has said very clearly that India can, go forward, and it has all right for self-defense. That is something that the US has also told India very clearly, that it supports India's right for self-defense. Also, let's keep in mind that when we talk of surgical strikes, as my colleague Snehesh has explained, surgical strikes has a different connotation altogether. This, what Air Force did today, was an act of self-defense which was required because there was intelligence that they would be hitting, that JEM was planning to hit some more multiple locations across the country. And at this point of time, we need to also understand that India cannot do anything irresponsible, because we are looking at UN also to take action against Masood Azhar, the chief of JEM, whom we want to get enlisted as a global terrorist.
Well, I have this question coming in from Anurag Dubey, who's asking, why didn't India use their prima facie plain Sukhoi 30 MKI in place of the Mirages? Well, that's a very interesting question, but remember that every single aircraft have a different sense of deployment. They are meant for different purposes. Why this Mirage 2000 was used? Because I don't know if you were able to see the videos from the recent exercise that was held in Rajasthan. The Mirage 2000 are able to carry out pinpointed precision attacks. They carry a mixture of both smart weapons as well as the conventional weapons that the various fighter jets use. So the smart weapons, the smart missiles, or the smart bombs as they are called, is something which enables us to target a particular location with pinpoint accuracy and exact, and this for the same reason that the Mirages were used. Also remember that the Su-30s were also flying in the air, as a precautionary measure in case anything happens from the Pakistani side. Well, I have a question which is coming in from Shreya Chaudhary. She's asking, will Pak retaliate at any point of time? I think there's another question which has come in saying that saying whether, do we expect retaliation from Pakistan? Should we be ready for war? Please also describe in detail what actually is a non-military combat. Well, to be fair, the Indian military, as you would have, you should log into the www.theprint.in and read the story in which we have mentioned that the Indian military has been put on high alert. Now, this high alert is something that has been issued by the Navy, the Air Force, as well as the Army is on high alert just in case Pakistan decides to retaliate. Remember that this is a standard operating procedure way back in 2016 also, when the surgical strikes were carried out by the special forces of the Indian Army. Both the Navy and the Air Force were put on high alert. And yes, today the operation that was carried out early in the morning at about 3:30 in the morning was something which is of a larger scale than what happened in 2016. And so yes, we have put our military on a high alert, but I'm not really, one will have to wait and see Pakistan can really would decide to escalate this to a next level. Remember that Pakistan has already gone ahead and denied any casualties on his side. Pakistan has gone ahead and denied the fact that Indian aircraft were able to intrude deep into Pakistan. What the Pakistani military has tweeted, and the tweet is a public record, which says that the Indian aircraft violated the airspace, the LOC, and once the Pakistani jets scrambled, the Indian aircraft came back. So I don't see any reason why, on what reason now will Pakistan really go ahead and escalate this whole issue altogether. Also remember that India has said that we've not targeted. So this question is whether what exactly is a non-military combat. Remember that this operation was carried out against terror safe haven, that's the terror camps, the training camps of the Jaish-e-Mohammed. The Indian Air Force did not target any military installations or any civilian areas. Had the Indian Air Force did so, then it would have been considered as an act of war, which would have given the right to Pakistan to retaliate. Here we have targeted the terror camps, and Pakistan can retaliate at non-state actors here in India. But the sad part is that the sad part for Pakistan is that there are no non-state actors here in India. I'll toss this question over to Nanima, whether because the FS used this term, the non-military term, and this was a very confusing term for many who are watching this. So I'll toss it over to Nanima to explain in further detail about how the MEA looks at this particular term.
Well, the Ministry of External Affairs has made it very clear that this is a non-military preemptive strike, which means that this was not targeted against Pakistani military camps or their military units. This was purely against the terror camps that are based out of that region in Balakot, which is a thick forest area. And there were several camps out there which they needed to target in order to kill and get and eliminate the kind of trainers that were there, the commanders of JEM and several other JEM terrorists. Also, we have one question from Shefali Dhar. What do these developments mean for Indo-China relations? Well, that's a good question, Shefali. The question remains how India now, up its ante in diplomatic skills to now finally pursue China, that, it has to take a decisive action against JEM. Let's also remember that our Minister of External Affairs, Sushma Swaraj, will be visiting, and she will be attending the 16th Trilateral Russia-India-China, which is called the RIC Trilateral Dialogue, where she will be taking it up with both her Chinese counterpart, Mr. Wang Yi, and her Russian counterpart, Mr. Lavrov. Over there, yes, the primary objective, what MEA sources tell me, will be to push China and to make them understand the situation and the fact that very soon it is probably assumed that the UN Sanctions Committee, the 1267 committee, will be meeting. And we have seen thrice China has vetoed voting against JEM. This time we are hopeful that Ms. Swaraj will be able to explain this to China, to understand the situation and to be on board.
Well, I have a question from Utpal Dev Burma, who's asking, what about Masood Azhar? Will India continue to try and catch catch up with him after this significant airstrike? Well, the answer to that question is, of course, a big yes. But Masood Azhar is currently somebody who is under the care and security of the Pakistan establishment, that is the Pakistani Army as well as the ISI. What we've gathered from the sources in the security establishment is that Masood Azhar is currently being protected by by a large group of security personnel back in Pakistan, which involves the local police, the military, as well as the ISI personnel. Now, he's not at a particular location for a longer period of time. They are moving him from one location to the other. But this is a sign that the Pakistanis are afraid of the fact that India might eventually get to him, and that is something that India is really focusing on. Well, this question is coming from Anurag Dubey, who's asking, would the surgical strike work for Modi government in the same way it worked in UP Assembly elections? Well, I would not want to get into the political aspect of it, whether this would work or not. But yes, it's a fact that this is a decisive decision that was taken by the Indian government, by the Narendra Modi-led government, and this is something I think in the run-up to the election, this is something that they would use to their own benefit. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi has not shied away from taking these actions, and has also not shied away from taking the political mileage out of the very same decisions that he has taken. Well, I have a question coming in from Sai Krishna, is asking, is categorizing the attack as non-military preemptive strike a diplomatic gambit by India to prevent an escalation? Well, what the ME has stated is actually a fact, that yes, these were not non-military preemptive strikes, because the ME has and the government has made it absolutely clear that they had received intelligence that terrorists from this camp were planning to launch suicide attacks across India, and they had to target this. And this is a non-military action, as I explained earlier, because here the Air Force jets targeted the terror camps, not Pakistani military installations and not civilian installations. And Pakistan has already made it tweeted and made it public that there were no casualties on his side. So yes, this is something that India has just put out facts. Now, our question coming in from Arnab Paul. Will not this ignite the anger of the rest of the terrorists to perform another suicide bombing? Well, I don't know whether it will ignite others or whether it will actually instill a sense of fear. But the fact is that India has, for the first time since the 1971 war, the fighter jets of the Indian Air Force have crossed the LOC. Remember that even in the Kargil battle, which was at the helm of the affairs was the former Prime Minister Vajpayee ji. Even he did not allow the fighter jets to cross the LOC. So this particular operation is of a huge significance, and I'll toss it over to Nanima for the response to this particular question itself, whether this would not induce the terrorists to launch more suicide attacks.
Sure, thanks. Also, while I answer this question, let me go back to the question that Mr. Krishna has asked, that is categorizing attack as non-military or diplomatic gambit. Well, in diplomacy, you can use several kind of language in order to diffuse escalating tension, but at the same time, you need to pass the right message at the right time. And that is what India has done today. Whether it will be a gambit or not, that time will only say, because let's remember the attack has happened quite inside Pakistan's territory, and if Pakistan wants to retaliate, it will retaliate, that remains to be seen. However, going by what Pakistan in the morning had tweeted, that nothing has happened, which means they will not respond to it, as they did not respond to India's surgical strikes. Coming to Mr. Paul's question, again, this remains to be seen whether this will ignite the anger of the terrorists or not. Yes, of course, they will try and retaliate, but our armed forces are also prepared for any kind of untoward incident that happens. And as we all understand that this is a situation where tensions are high, things can get escalate, which is why everything is on high alert. And yes, there can be response from Pakistan side, or there can be response from the terror camps. And as far as my sources confirm me, there can be some more suicide attacks that can happen. India needs to be prepared with all its forces.
Well, also I'll add one particular line. Remember that we are in a state of war as far as Kashmir is concerned, because what is happening in Kashmir is a proxy war that has been waged by Pakistan. Now, yes, when we take actions against terror groups, there's a likely possibility of them striking back too. So yes, that is something that has been anticipated. The Indian military is on high alert. We have various operations that are taking place. The police across the country have been put on high alert, and so one will really have to wait and watch and hope and pray that nothing of that sort happens. Well, I have this question coming in from an individual who's asking, there were reports of Indian AWACS tracked by civilian trackers near the LOC. Are these reports reliable? If yes, is it normal for AWACS to be tracked? Well, it was not just the AWACS which were tracked, but also the IL-78, which is a mid-air refueler that was used. So yes, a lot of websites which track these private aircraft have been tracking this particular development. I spoke to senior Air Force officials regarding this, and they laughed it off by saying that usually how they track is when they put on the civilian transponder, and they were wondering whether these aircraft actually continued on the civilian transponder. And at the same time, they also pointed out that there's a lot of spoofing which happens. It's not that that people are able to track the fighter aircraft. Now, for an attack to take place, there are a number of dynamics that come into play, along with spoofing of identity and others, to hoodwink the enemy and the people at large about what exactly is happening at this particular moment of time. So yes, I would not be really worried about the civilian, these websites, the civilian radars picking up the AWACS as well as the mid-air refuelers, but I'll go by what the Air Force people have been telling me, that there's a lot of spoofing that happens. Well, I've got a question which is coming from Andrew, who said, any specific reason as to why the Mirage 2000 was chosen? As I mentioned earlier, this was a question that was asked earlier too, to which I've responded that the Mirage are capable of carrying out precision strikes, and they carry a wide array of weapons on board, including the smart bombs as well as conventional ones. And so yes, this Mirage 2000 was used. Well, I've a question coming in from Rahul Dhar. I think I'll toss it over to Nanima. And then Nanima, the question is, Pakistan leaders are asking to boycott OIC meeting. What is your take?
Well, Pakistani leaders have always been opposing to India's entry at the OIC for the last 50 years. This is nothing new, and of course, now they have got all the more reason. However, this is not a decision for Pakistan to make alone. This is a decision that all 57 members of OIC need to take to make sure whether they will boycott or not, and what needs to be done at the level of OIC. That only remains to be seen. We have another question from Mr. Burman. How should we, as residents of border state, how should we prepare for this? Well, I think the situation has not yet arrived for that kind of a preparation, but however, the government is on high alert. If something of that sort happens, all the residents of the border state will be alerted.
Well, exactly. That's exactly what Nanima said. In case there is a situation, the situation is not such, but in case there's a situation, trust in your local authorities. They would be the first one to inform you. The Indian military would also ensure that the civilians are taken care of first before launching of any such operations. So as of now, if you've not been informed by the administration or by the Indian military, then be rest assured that most likely nothing is happening, which increases the level of alert as such. Well, I have a question which is coming in from D. Radowski saying, are our BMDs activated as well? If so, what cities are we able to detect low-flying aircraft? Well, I'll tell you, I'll not get into the specifics of anything, but I can tell you for the fact that, as I said, log on to www.ThePrint.in, read our stories which clearly mention what is the situation right now and how we are responding to it. In one of our stories, we've mentioned that the Indian military is on high alert. Now, when I mention about the Indian military, it means the Army, the Air Force, as well as the Navy, and along with it, all the equipment that we use, which is including the air defense, mechanisms that we have. So yes, they've all been put on high alert. And that was the last question we were taking. But thank you, viewers, so much for logging in and sending in your questions. Do log in and keep track of the YouTube live of The Print for more interesting Q&As that will take place tomorrow. Thanking you for logging in.